Okay, so if you're trying to find that exact moment, when the whole idea of a united Roman Italy really dies for good,
Yeah, where do you actually look?
you don't look at the fall of the Western Empire. You look a bit later. You look at the arrival of this group, the Lombards.
Yeah,
They just completely reset the board.
they really did.
So today, let's figure out who they were, how a pretty small group managed to conquer and rule huge parts of Italy for 200 years.
And how they left a mark that's still there. I mean, the region of Lombardy,
It's named right after them. It's a permanent legacy.
I think we have to start with where they came from.
Yeah.
The Lombards were a Germanic people, and they were, for a long time, outsiders.
Right.
Their own stories trace them way back to the area around the Elbe River in northern Europe. They weren't a settled people. They were migratory
So they were constantly moving?
for centuries.
Yeah.
And it was a slow, often brutal movement south. It's how they developed this incredibly fierce warrior culture. They had
Just
to.
to survive.
Exactly. They were always defending themselves against other tribes, looking for better land. That mindset is really the key to understanding them later on.
But they weren't just wandering aimlessly. By the 6th century, they'd sort of paused, right? They settled for a bit in Pannonia.
Which we'd call modern-day Hungary. And that location was so strategic.
Because they were sitting right on the border of the Byzantine Empire.
Yeah, they had a front row seat. They could see the political chaos, but they could also see the incredible wealth that was still in Italy, even after all the wars.
Italy was a huge prize. It was recovering from the Gothic Wars. The defenses were weak.
Their king, Alboin, he saw his chance. He decided, that's it. Italy is the final destination.
So in 568 AD, he makes his move.
He does. Alboin leads the Lombards across the Julian Alps. And what's amazing is just how unprepared Italy was. The Byzantines were supposed to be in charge.
But they were exhausted.
Totally depleted. They'd been fighting for years, their resources were drained, and frankly, they just didn't have the will to protect all these inland cities.
Which created a power vacuum.
A huge one. And the Lombards just walked right in. They captured major northern cities like Milan and Pavia, often without much of a fight at all.
So this is it. This is where the map of Italy changes forever. The idea of a single Roman-controlled peninsula, it's just gone.
Shattered.
Mm-hmm.
From that point on, for centuries, Italy is this patchwork quilt of different powers.
But they didn't conquer everything, did they?
No, the Byzantines were smart. They held on to the coastal areas, the land around Rome, and parts of the south.
So you get this split. A Lombard kingdom inland with its capital at Pavia, and then this sort of Roman corridor controlled by the Byzantines.
And the kingdom they set up was really interesting. It was very decentralized, which, makes sense given their warrior background. Well, you had the king in Pavia, and he was the official ruler. But he had to share power with these really strong regional military commanders, the dukes.
Ah, the dukes.
Yeah, these were the guys who led the actual conquest. So they were rewarded with huge territories, their duchies, which they ruled almost like their own little kingdoms.
So if the dukes are all acting like independent kings, fighting each other, challenging the main king, how did this kingdom even hold together for 200 years? It sounds like controlled chaos.
That's the perfect way to put it. It was controlled chaos. It's the central paradox of the Lombard state.
So what was the glue?
A shared identity. Despite all the infighting, they all saw themselves as Lombards. The kings had to constantly manage the dukes, sometimes fighting them, sometimes marrying into their families, but they needed them for defense. It was a kingdom built on personal loyalty, not bureaucracy.
And that instability is really a key to understanding Italian history later on, that regionalism.
Absolutely. And that military structure is reflected in their whole society.
Let's talk about their class system. It was really clearly defined.
Yeah.
At the very top, you have the free men. These are your warriors, your landowners. And the right to carry a weapon wasn't just for show.
No, it was a status symbol. Proof of your legal standing. It meant you could serve in the army, you could go to the local assemblies, you had real political power.
Okay, so below them.
You have the half-free people, or the Aldi. These were often former Romans, or just people who were economically dependent on the landowners. They worked the land.
But they didn't have the same rights.
Exactly. No political rights. They couldn't even represent themselves in court. They needed a protector. And then at the very bottom, of course, were slaves, with basically no rights at all.
This whole system must have relied on, local traditions and word-of-mouth justice, which sounds messy.
It was. But then something changes everything in 643 AD, the Edict of Rothri.
And this wasn't just another law, this was a huge step.
It was revolutionary. For the
Okay.
first time, they wrote down all their traditional oral laws
In Latin, of all things.
in Latin, which tells you they're shifting from a migrating tribe to a real state. They're making their laws permanent and predictable.
And the main goal was super practical, wasn't it? It was all about stopping the constant,
Blood feuds.
the blood feuds, that endless cycle of revenge.
Right, so the edict basically put a price tag on every crime.
Literally,
Right.
a price on a broken finger, a price for murder.
And that price, the weregild, or man money, it depended entirely on the victim's social status.
So injuring a free man would cost you way more than injuring a half-free person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It legally cemented that social hierarchy we were talking about.
Now here's a detail I find fascinating. These laws, at first, were only for the Lombards.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. The huge Roman population they were ruling, they were allowed to just keep using their own Roman law.
A dual legal system. It shows how they were ruling alongside the locals, but, legally separate from them.
And that separation was a huge problem when it came to religion.
Right. Because the Lombards who arrived were not Roman Catholic.
No, most of them followed Arianism, which is a form of Christianity, but one the Catholic Church considered a heresy.
What was the main difference?
It's pretty theological, but it boiled down to the nature of Christ. Arians believed Christ was created by God, and so was subordinate to him. Roman Catholics believed in the Trinity, that Christ was equal and co-eternal with God.
So this wasn't just a small disagreement.
Oh no. Politically, it meant the Lombard king and his nobles were spiritually cut off from the Pope and almost all of their Italian subjects. That's not a stable situation.
So how did they fix that? You can't rule a country when its most powerful religious figure, the Pope, sees you as a heretic.
You can't. So the shift was slow, but it was deliberate. Over a couple of generations, the Lombard elite started converting to Roman Catholicism.
They realized they had to integrate.
Exactly. And a key figure here was Queen Theodolinda. She was a Catholic regent, and she worked hard to build good relations with the Pope and supported building Catholic churches.
So by the 8th century,
The conversion was mostly complete. And that religious unity was huge. It stabilized the kingdom and helped them finally shed that outsider status.
let's talk about their culture for a second. They were amazing craftsmen.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Especially their metalwork. We have found this intricate gold jewelry. Incredible stuff. Their architecture was also this really cool mix of Germanic styles with the Roman and Byzantine things they found in Italy.
And they left a mark on the language, too.
They did. They adopted Latin for running the government, but a lot of Germanic words, especially for things like war and hunting, entered the local dialects. Many are still there in northern Italy today.
And the economy. Pretty straightforward.
Very. It was almost all based on agriculture. Land was wealth. The dukes and the free warriors owned these huge estates, worked by the half-free, growing wheat and barley, raising pigs and cattle. It was a classic landowning military aristocracy.
Okay, so that brings us to their downfall. And it feels like we're coming full circle, back to those powerful, independent dukes.
We are. Because while the main kingdom in the north was getting more stable, you had these two massive duchies in the south, Spoleto and Benevento, that just acted like they were their own countries.
They just ignored the king in Pavia.
Pretty much, yeah. Which meant the Lombards never fully unified the peninsula. And that decentralization, that weakness, played right into the hands of their biggest enemy.
The papacy. The popes in Rome.
The popes were terrified. The Lombards were eventually going to march on Rome and take over.
They were just too close for comfort.
Way too close. So the papacy made one of the smartest geopolitical moves of the entire Middle Ages. They looked for help.
Across the Alps.
To the rising power of the Franks. By making an alliance with the Franks, the popes basically traded a nearby threat they couldn't control for a powerful protector who was far away.
And that set the stage for the end?
It did. The final showdown is in 774 AD. The Lombard king Desiderius makes a huge mistake. He picks a fight with the leader of the Franks, a guy named Charlemagne.
And Charlemagne was not someone you wanted to pick a fight with.
Not at all. The Pope called for help, and Charlemagne invaded Italy with a massive army. He surrounded the Lombard capital, Pavia, and forced Desiderius to surrender.
But he didn't just leave, he did something totally new.
He deposed King Desiderius, but instead of giving the land back to the Byzantines or to the Pope, he just took it. He declared himself the king of the Lombards and the Franks.
Wow.
And just like that, Lombard independence in the north was over. The kingdom was absorbed into what would become Charlemagne's massive empire.
But that wasn't the end of the Lombards entirely.
No, not quite. The Duchy of Benevento, way down south, was too far away and too strong for Charlemagne to conquer easily. It actually survived as a distinct Lombard state for another 300 years.
So when we look back, what's the final footprint? I mean, besides the name Lombardy on the map of Italy.
The biggest legacy is the blend. The Lombards didn't just wipe out the Roman system, they put their Germanic warrior culture on top of it.
Right. They used Latin law to write down their traditions. They adopted Roman Catholicism.
And they created these strong regional power centers. They were the bridge that took Italy from the ancient world into the Middle Ages. They fundamentally mixed Germanic and Mediterranean culture.
So to sum it all up, their 200-year rule permanently shattered that old dream of a united Roman Italy. They gave Italy its first major written law code, and they set up the deep regional divides that, you could argue, still shape the country's identity.
And here's a final thought for you. When you study history, remember that sometimes the greatest political genius comes from the weak. The papacy had no army, just spiritual authority. But it played two military powers, the Lombards and the Franks, against each other to guarantee its own survival, and in doing so, changed the map of Europe forever.
Good luck with your studies.